I'm back! You thought I'd gotten off this high horse about a decade-long dead franchise. Well, joke's on you! I don't have any self-respect! Hello everyone, welcome back. This is going to be the second video in a series I'm doing on the Golden Sun franchise. If you haven't done so already, I highly recommend that you go and check out the first video before continuing, as there's going to be spoilers for the entire first game right from the get-go, links in the description. With that out of the way, I'm sure you all know how this plays out, so I'm just going to get right into it, but not first before dealing with the true final boss of the series. Yes, this game lets us transfer our saves from the previous journey, and you can do so quite easily if you have two Game Boy Advances and a functioning link cable, but good fucking luck with that. If you're like the majority of us, you'll need to suffer through this extensive password system. Never say I don't suffer for your sake. Our tale begins once again following the events of Jenna and Creighton during the Venus Lighthouse incident. We part ways with Felix as he's about to confront Isaac at the end of the first game and make our way down to the lighthouse entrance to reintroduce us to Alex, who reminds us of this party's goals and shows off a little piece of what he can do. Our mission is to reignite the four elemental lighthouses of the world of Wayard and introduce magic back into the world. We never really got a motive for this group during the first game, but blink and you miss it, Jenna gives off a line saying that Felix and her parents' lives depend on them carrying this mission out. While this should right away raise off your bullshit alarms, remember that even Felix managed to survive his encounter with the series' main antagonist, so it might not be that far-fetched. You're just left to ponder on this for the entire game, so keep it in mind. Alex, meanwhile, remains enigmatic as ever. It's still unclear what his goals for this mission are, but he's on our side for now, and it's probably better to keep it that way. This tutorial segment is very effective and, surprisingly for this series, brief. It quickly recaps us on the events leading up, reminds us both narratively and through gameplay that this group of people are fugitives from whatever constitute as the law around these parts, and reminds us of our goals and motives, all the while reacquainting you with the combat system in a safe environment. You can already see through this segment that the gameplay this time around is not so much more of the same, but the same, and more. Jenna starts off with powerful new synergy that she didn't have access to in the first game, and new enemy types start popping up left and right. Once we make it to the peninsula, Alex rejoins us and the finale of the first game takes place. Venus Lighthouse lights up the sky and, being the light represented by the element of Earth, creates massive quakes around the region, causing the chunk of landmass to break off and drift among the sea, where shortly after the bodies of Felix and Sheba are discovered. Cue title card. Golden Sun: The Lost Age came out in 2002, only a little less than a year after the first game, yet manages to add so much to the series that it solidifies itself as the identity of the franchise. I guarantee you the majority of fans will agree, if there's any Golden Sun game to play, this is the one. The unfortunate thing is that it just depends so much on the first game to set everything up and deliver on why it's so much better. While it's less of a sequel and more of the second act in a two-act structure, hence the title for these videos, the game takes everything about the first title and exaggerates all of its qualities, good and bad, to make itself known as the definitive Golden Sun experience. The first Golden Sun game was a pretty cookie-cutter JRPG, but it came out on the Game Boy Advance during a time where those kinds of games were a scarcity. A lot of people, myself included, might be very biased towards the game simply because of its context, but I have a strong argument to make that The Lost Age manages to rise above that fault, in at least some ways. When I say that the game exaggerates the qualities of its predecessor, I do mean that quite literally. For the most part, anything about the first game that was done well, like the class system and the world building, was massively improved on, while some of the shortcomings of the game, like its main narrative and the amounts of dialogue, are unfortunately here to say, arguably worse than before. This old fart who never shuts the fuck up is a permanent member of your party, let's leave it at that. Some people might not like this game as much for some of its downsides. I can definitely see that, but I interpret this game as working with its strengths. But enough summarizing, I should get back to the story so you can see exactly what I mean by all of this. Sometime later, the drifting island of Adijima nearly makes it to a southern continent, barely missing it when the tremors from Venus Lighthouse cause something incredible to occur.
Yes, Mia! Do it!
Wash me away with your gamer girl pee! I'm gonna regret this joke. A massive tidal wave hits the island, causing it to impact with the continent of Indra, allowing us escape into the land below. After checking for everyone's safety, all people are accounted for, save for Alex, when we are finally given full control of our main protagonist of the game, Felix. That's right, after all of that build-up but without any understanding of the motive behind the villains of our first journey, we finally get to take a step into the shoes of Edgelord Extraordinaire, which I must say is a welcome change. Isaac is fine and all, he makes a decent anime protagonist, but let's be real here, he's a basic bitch. Felix at the very least has a backstory and a much more interesting design, at least in my opinion, and is a big reason why this game has such a good identity. You're playing as the villains this time around. It's established early on that you are fugitives, and that you'll need to be keeping yourselves incognito as you go along the events of this journey. When we make it to the first town, we immediately see the worldwide effects that this massive tidal wave has had, which is a big recurring theme throughout the early portions of the game. The citizens are devastated, children have gone missing from their homes, and everyone seems more preoccupied with getting their lives back on track than helping you out. Speaking of which, our mission right now is reaching Jupiter Lighthouse, which lies in the western ocean of the world, so our first order of business is obtaining a boat. It should be an easy task, right? There's a lot of ocean to go around and tons of villages settled nearby. Finding a ship shouldn't take too long at all. Alright, time to ride up those big boy pants. I love this game, I really do, but focus is something that the main narrative is really lacking. This little game of catch-up that the characters put you through at the beginning is the last time we're going to be hearing about the lighthouses and our main journey until maybe the last 3 hours. While I wouldn't say the stuff in between is nearly as pointless as some of the shameless filler that the first game puts you through, this journey definitely does a better job at making the stuff you do in between all feel like it's building up to a larger arc. It does, however, feel like it's either stretched out longer than it needs to be, or could have at least felt a little more intertwined with the main narrative. I really enjoy the journey more than the destination, don't get me wrong, but it leaves a big empty hole in the experience when you take a minute to ask yourself, wait, why am I here again? What the fuck was I supposed to be doing? Like, I guess this is spoilers for a bit later on, but we won't be seeing Isaac again until near the endgame, despite the game constantly telling you that he's supposed to be pursuing us and that we need to be super afraid of him or whatever. Speaking of which, something that I do appreciate is that throughout your journey, you'll be occasionally reminded of your previous feats from your first journey, if you've transferred your saves.
Ain't it the bloke what locked us up last time? Are you fucking daft? I won 2 birds last time, and that lad with the blonde variety of anime hair. Fucking gank him!
Characters you either helped or defeated as Isaac will occasionally visit you and give you some neat tools to use along your adventure, with the goal that you'll pass down their sentiments when you finally do see him again. A nice touch and a good reward for players who completed the first game. Anyways, like I said, the first big chunk of the game has you searching for a boat to get offshore, but I'm just gonna give you the Cliff Notes version. Most of what else happens consists of distractions along the way, world building, getting new synergies to help you progress, and the dungeons that hold them, etc, etc. I'll just leave that for you to discover for yourself if you decide to play the games, as again, it's actually the most enjoyable parts of the games when you focus on that. I wouldn't want to take that experience away from you. After a few tutorial dungeons that reintroduce you to some of the basic mechanics, we come across the town of Madra, whom cannot seem to catch a break. Just as soon as they begin recovering from the tidal wave, their city gets ransacked by pirates from the east, and as soon as that blows over, a warrior tribe attacks them again from the west. It turns out that the earthquakes have knocked over more landmass than just the island we were floating on, as the continent of Indra is now sandwiched between 2 other landmasses, causing all of this mess in the first place, where Madra is stuck in the middle of it all. In the confusion, the town managed to imprison a young man named Pierres on suspicion of being a pirate, despite his desperate pleas to the contrary. It turns out that the mayor of the town has gone to the city of Al-Hafra in the east in order to apprehend the leader of the pirates, who supposedly could attest to the young man's innocence. If we go to the prison to see Pierres, we get quite the show.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
A man after my heart indeed. And an adept at that, so helping him out would definitely be in our best interest. Al-Hafra is also a port town, so they're bound to have a working boat or 2 lying around, right? Right? No. Turns out, when we get there, we can still see that the tidal wave has devastated this town, much more than any of the others on the way here. Snooping around in the town will have us discover that the leader of the pirate gang, named Briggs, is hiding out somewhere. Not only that, but we get our reunion with Alex, who provides us with the information that the one boat in this town's possession has already been sold, to the pirates no less, but it's in complete disarray. That is, as he implies, unless we adepts do something about it. Ah, I getcha. We go stop the pirates, then we just borrow the ship we so generously fixed up. You're a sneaky one, Alex, you fucking rat you. Try as you might though, while you can make some significant progress on the ship's repairs, there's still yet another giant boulder blocking our progress which we are powerless to stop. It's like Felix just can't escape these things. When we go inside to inspect the ship, we sneak up on Briggs, who all but admits within earshot of all the pillaging he and his gang have done.
I sure do love pillaging and stealing and raping innocent. No wait, not that last one. This is still a kid's game.
They come from a town back north called Champa, where the land is too barren to grow crops or raise livestock, so they have to resort to thievery to keep their people fed. We have a little anime fight, he admits that Pierres is innocent, and arrests the damn thief. In the end, we can't do anything about this boat, so we'll have to make our way back to Madra to see if there's any other leads we can chase. If we report back to Alex, he commends us for doing a good deed just for the sake of others, but no matter what we say to him, it doesn't seem like he intends to join us despite our common goal. I feel like this might be a bit of an oversight, like he obviously intends to fulfill his own agenda, but if you try to mind read him, he flat out mocks the player for trying to get anything out of him. There's really nothing as far as a good reason for why he doesn't come along. There's not even an option to ask. He kinda just chills there until our next encounter. We have to make it back to Madra, but we can't exactly go back the way we came. We gotta take the long way around the continent, and along the way we have to deal with some fucking bullshit, and I'll get back to this one, don't worry, and go sleep with some furries or some shit like that. When we make it back, Pierres is already gone, having been granted his freedom, but not before yet another fucking attack from the Western tribe, this time taking Pierres' treasured black orb, which if you had seen beforehand bore a striking resemblance to something that Babby had entrusted to Isaac's group last time. Following in pursuit leads us to Wakanda, who had taken Pierres' orb as an offering to their statue of a god. By lending out a helping hand, Pierres agrees to come along with us in order to regain his lost possession. He introduces himself as Pierres of Lemuria, much to Kraden's ecstasy, but before he can nerd out, we agree to get our business taken care of here first. He does reaffirm some things we know about Lemuria, that it's shrouded by both deep fog and thick currents, and only a Lemurian ship, which can be activated by such a black orb, can be used to navigate through it, so helping this man out is definitely going to be worth our while once again. Pierres joins us as our fourth party member, and after dealing with the ritual and taking back the orb, we find out that it's yet another big misunderstanding. The Kabamba were just trying to appease their wrathful god and appoint a new leader. But we don't arrest anyone or demand reprimands from the people who ransacked and pillaged from innocents, because that would be, Fuck it, we boat now. Well, that's not exactly true. Before we take to the high seas, this DeviantArt reject here comes to harass us as she claims to be Minardi's sister, asking us of her whereabouts. We break the bad news to her, and she reacts about as well as you'd expect, swearing to get revenge on Isaac. Whatever, not really our problem to deal with. The Eastern Seas are probably my most favorite part of this entire game. As of right now, we have two major goals to achieve. The first being to get to the Western Sea where Jupiter Lighthouse exists. But as the ocean is split completely in two by the hunk of continents in the center with no way to pass as of now, our only option left is to get Pierres back home to Lemuria. But as you might expect, getting there is a bit more easily said than done. As you might recall, Lemuria is surrounded by thick fog and strong currents, and even though we have a Lemurian ship and a native with us, even Pierres doesn't remember exactly how to get back, as this is the first time he's ever left home. Is it Pierre or Pierres? I'm not really sure about that one. The answers to these riddles lies within the natives of the Eastern Ocean, and you'll have to piece together the puzzle from the myths and stories that they tell. What I really love about this segment is how the game forces you to get a better understanding of the world that Camelot has so lovingly crafted in order to have the information that you need to progress. You are pretty much required to go through every island and dungeon that you have access to in order to get through the next progression gate, but the wonderful thing about this is that you can do it all in pretty much any order that you want. And unlike some other games where having a huge non-linear segment breaks the pacing by having a large chunk be poorly balanced, this game at the very least attempts to have a quote-unquote intended route that can be totally ignored if you're skilled enough. Don't get me wrong now, the game is still piss easy, but this time around it's so much more designed with the intent of encouraging you to experiment with the expansive class system. Not only do you have all of the spells, classes, and equipment from the first game to use, but new things are thrown at you to try out at an incredibly fast rate. Whether it be in the form of the new class-changing equipment, or the fact that the game just throws water gin at you way before you even meet Pierres, the game is practically yelling at you to try out some of the dual and tri-elemental classes. Throughout the game you'll find tablets which allow you access to dual element summons. While not as strong as the single elemental ones that require the same number of gin, they are easier to pull off mid-combat and they all have secondary effects. My favorite of which being Madra, who gives each member of your party an attack buff. You'll find more and more of these as the game progresses, with the most powerful of which clocking in at up to 10 and even 12 gin required. In terms of the aesthetics, everything in this game feels like an improvement. The music's better, the world is bigger and badder, and the graphics for all the new attacks and summons really push the GBA to its absolute limits. Like seriously, even the frame rate has to take a few dips during some of these fancy effects. You don't see that very often back in the old days. Speaking of, you might remember me saying something last time to the effect of it being really hard to capture footage of these spectacular moves due to the odd resolution of the GBA. Well, that's not entirely the case. You see, that isn't really too much of an issue if the computer that you're using to capture footage isn't 8 years old. Oopsie poopsie. As for what you're actually doing at this point in the game, the one in the center spotlight is none other than the fantastic gauntlet of dungeons that the game has this time around, taking the form of ancient ruins and the elemental mountains known as Aqua Rock, Gaia Rock, and Ares Rock. Yes, you heard me right, Ares Rock. Not earlier, now. You see, Ares Rock is a notorious dungeon for people new to the game for being far longer than it has any right to be, and while it is lengthy, it was done so on purpose. While it was on the beaten path around the time we took care of Briggs and his pirates, it's much more manageable to tackle now that we have a fourth party member and more experience under our belt. You don't need the reward from the dungeon until about this point in the game, and while it is absolutely possible to do so when you first arrive, I really think the design of the dungeon, being easy to get lost in, and with little to no resources for recovery, was made with the idea of you coming back on your first playthrough when you got a little bit stronger. In any case, I really love the dungeons in this game as opposed to the first Golden Sun. Puzzles this time around are much more complex and logic-based. Instead of simply associating a mechanic with a corresponding synergy, you'll often be tasked with taking two or more different pieces and putting them together. Instead of just use blue key on blue door, you're doing a lot more logical work and making mental maps. The synergies that you use in the field are also a bit more developed. More of them are multi-purposed and can interact with the world in a lot more than just one way. Not only are they incredibly well designed, but the dungeons this time are much more thematically appropriate for the game. Instead of generic forests, mines, and caves, we're traveling through points in the world where the four elements exist in their strongest forms, each of them holding a new power for your party of adepts, which we'll need to tackle through ancient ruins that hold the key to the mysteries of an old civilization, a lost age, if you will. The only downside to this kind of approach is what I mentioned earlier with the game's method of conveyance. It's very easy to get lost and sidetracked, so much so that you'll be asking yourself what you're supposed to be doing, and even then, a lot of what you do is just because you can, not necessarily because you have a good reason to be there. Your only real hints on what to do are just myths and hearsay from NPCs, which can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. However, I still appreciate that what you're doing is much more complex than just get from point A to point B this time around. Instead of just a bunch of filler arcs that get abandoned as soon as they're done, everything that you do in the Eastern Sea is building up to a larger narrative arc, which will all come to a head when we finally reach Lemuria. But before we do that, there's just one little bit of unfinished business we need to take care of. You might remember the boat back in Al-Hafra. Around this point in time, we seem to have gathered quite a bit more synergy, maybe enough to finally fix that mess. I don't know what we have to gain from doing so, but maybe you might feel it's like a courtesy for them helping attest to Pierre's innocence earlier. There's no real easy way around it. This is just one of those awkward moments you'll find in some RPGs where you just have to do something because you can, not because you have a reason to, and it just so happens to progress the story. Once we fix the boat, Briggs escapes and steals it, making his way back to his hometown of Champa. And as a thank you for our assistance, he only has this to say.
Neener blay?
That's just in bad taste.
When we pursue, we find that Briggs' life of piracy isn't really one out of malice or ill will, but it's the only thing keeping his hometown from starving. That would be sympathetic, but it's no excuse for bad manners. We catch up to him hiding behind his grandmother, tail between his legs, which goes something like,
Grandma, the bad man is gonna take me away forever! Fucking kill him!
Okay, sure, lol. Well, I did all I could.
Turns out here that Granny here is wise up to Briggs' misdeeds, and as a show of good faith, she helps us reforge the pieces of the trident that we've been collecting along our journey, which is the last key we will need to finally reach Lemuria. On our way out, however, we have a nice improper reunion with Alex, now joined by Karst, as well as some added muscle by the name of Agatio. It seems they've come to bully us into action, as it's been about 10 or so hours into the game, and by this point, we've done everything except light one of the lighthouses. I guess the developers thought we needed an antagonist on the same level as Satoros and Minardi this time, but I don't think they fit quite as well. They never really do anything to antagonize you until much later, and they aren't even introduced until about halfway into the game. In fact, it's not like they're even capable of doing anything here. Alex suggests that they aren't even bright enough to solve the puzzles of the lighthouses, so they still need us. Even the game's own characters are calling these two dumb, take that as a sign. Their inclusion seems pretty baffling to me. It's easy to imagine a game without either of their inclusion, as we'll see that Felix's conflict in this side of the story isn't man versus man, but something else entirely. Alex, however, wants to ruin our day even further, as he's aware that our friend Kraden is on our side on behalf of Lord Babby. Perhaps as a means to stop us from getting further sidetracked, he bears the bad news that he's finally passed, and that the people of Tolby are under the impression that we had something to do with it, meaning sailing back to the lands we previously traveled might lead to some, unsavory encounters. Whether or not this is true remains to be seen. It could just be something that Alex made up to get us to do what he wants. I wouldn't put that past him. This is the only time that it's mentioned in the entire game, however that does mean that the entire build-up with Babby goes fucking nowhere, and I'm really upset about that. In any case, it would seem that such news would mean that Kraden would no longer have any reason to join us on this quest, music to my fucking ears. However, it would seem that he's developed a new purpose, which I'm sure he'll tell us all about when the time is right. Yay. But for now, we finally have the legendary Trident of Ankle, the last piece of the puzzle needed to reach Lemuria. After we politely return it to its owner, we can at long last see what lies beyond the sea. Lemuria is a land where time has stood still, a land of ancient beings from a civilization before the flow of magic had halted in the world. While it's leagues beyond anything imaginable for the technology or advancement of knowledge in the outside world, everything about this city has halted. No one ages, no children are born, and deaths are very rare. The king of this land has ruled for over 500 years. Everything about the presentation of this place is absolutely breathtaking. From the architecture calling back to depictions of the lost city of Atlantis to the soundtrack implementing a drumline imitating that of a ticking clock. It's just so... it's fucking Kino, baby! However, it seems that there's trouble in paradise, as even though the occurrence is quite rare, people do die in the city. When she heard that he had gone missing, it seems that Pierres' mother had passed due to her weak heart. Leaving him to grieve for a while, we meet up with the man known as Lumpa, the very same one that had traveled with Babby so very long ago. It would seem that our alliance with Pierres was more than mere chance, as he had been given a special assignment from the king himself, to seek those who would break the seal on alchemy and light the elemental lighthouses. Lumpa himself is the only one currently living in Lemuria who has seen the outside world, and it's a far different place than when alchemy had been sealed. Imagine a world where every civilization was as advanced as this one, people capable of building tremendous monuments and magical structures able to harness the powers of the elements themselves. In all of the lands we have visited thus far, no such a people exists today, and King Hydros of Lemuria, as well as Kraden, seem to think that the seal on alchemy has something to do with it. However, being in the state that it's in, the Lemurians have not been able, or rather willing, to do anything about it. In a city of perfection where no one ages, no one gets sick, there's no crime, no struggles with the outside world, what reason is there to be motivated? Why progress? Why bother when you're at the peak of perfection? It appears that Lemuria has struggled with this conflict for quite some time, ever since the seal on alchemy was placed on the world so very long ago. When we finally reunite with Pierres and meet with King Hydros himself, he brings us knowledge of the world long since gone by. If you've been paying attention so far, you might have noticed that the world of Weyard mimics that of our own planet very closely in terms of geography and cultures. We've been to lands similar to Europe, Asia, Africa, even Australia and Antarctica as of now, and what's revealed here is very shocking. When we compare the map of the world that the Lemurians have used for over hundreds of years to the map that Loompa used when he first arrived, we come to an incredible conclusion. You guessed it, it's flat! No, really, Weyard is actually a flat world. You can even sail to the edge of it. One of the islands we visited so far even exists there. They tell stories to children who misbehave that they'll be thrown off the edge, and no one has ever come back. It's really terrifying. The expanse known as Gaia Falls is growing every day, and eventually, the whole world will be swallowed into the abyss. And the reason for this decay is that the world is a living being, and the seal on alchemy is cutting off its source of fuel. Pierres' reason for leaving Lemuria was to confirm this theory. There would be those who are opposed to our mission, like the people of Vale, whose very lives are based around keeping the seal of alchemy intact. If magic is unleashed upon the world, there might be those who would seek to abuse such power, but if nothing is done, the world will definitely come to an absolute end. It's a very existential dilemma, one that Felix has apparently known about for quite some time, and now has chosen to be the unsung hero of the world, even if it means playing the villain for now. With that knowledge in tow, King Hydros gives us one final gift, being the ability that we need to finally sail into the Western Seas and complete our mission. But of course it can never be that easy. There's still a little bit of side work to do before we can tackle Jupiter Lighthouse proper, and that lies in the continent of Ateca. We arrive at the Shaman's Village, who have also sworn to seclude themselves from the outside world. When we confront their leader, he asks us what reason we have for coming here. We don't really have one, but if you remember way back in the last game, you might recall the prophecy of Hammett, who was told his shaman's rod was needed to be exchanged for something in around this area of the world. It's really a bit of a stretch, considering that that line of dialogue is part of an optional side quest in, you know, the last game, but I guess you're supposed to piece together that the shaman's rod needs to be used in the Shaman Village, because it's been sitting in your inventory for the entire game. Yes, it's dumb. No, it's not a satisfying conclusion to that arc. Are you starting to see the pattern? Listen, I don't want to dwell on it for any longer than I need to, so let's just get back on track. Hey, I just wanted to take some time and have some real talk with you. I definitely did not forget to put a spoiler warning in my script. I just wanted to say that you should go and play these games if you haven't yet. They're really good. Okay, that's all. I love you! With another synergy in tow, we can finally scale up Jupiter Lighthouse, and after all that build-up, I've gotta say, it's a bit of a letdown. Jupiter is easily my least favorite of the lighthouses. There's a lot of backtracking and a lot of moving block puzzles that take far longer than they need to. As we make it near the top, we are finally caught up by Isaac and his crew, still intent on stopping our mission. However, it seems that they get caught in a trap set up by Karsten Agatio, who intend on finishing them off for good if we don't do anything about it. Still having a soft spot for their old friends, Felix and Jenna come to their aid, provoking the duo to finally act like villains. Despite our differences in methodology, we still have a mission to accomplish, so we are demanded to take the Mars Star off of Isaac's hands, who seems to trust us, at least for now, and we are sent to go light the lighthouse while the others stay and tend to Isaac's wounds. Pierre senses the danger in following the obvious bad guys, so he comes along for support. When the deed is finally done, big fucking surprise, Karsten and Agatio steal the Mars Star so they can do the rest themselves.
Oh shit, here we go again.
You can actually lose this fight, and you know what? Props to them, it can actually be a little bit challenging when your party is drained and they have to come back slowly over the course of a few turns. But regardless of the outcome, Alex arrives to intervene, as it's clear that he still needs both of our parties in order to finish the job. After they escape, we finally have our long-awaited reunion with Isaac and company, whomst finally demand an explanation for what we're doing. We meet up in Contigo, the birthplace of Ivan, and we are met with a familiar face. Master Hama decides to reveal everything to us now, as she's been given far more than just a single prophecy. It turns out she was not only the adept from Hammet's story, but is in fact Ivan's sister, and she explains the situation that if the last lighthouse isn't lit, the world will be plunged into ruin, faster than we might think. Why she decides to tell us this now instead of, before we murdered Saturos and Minardi? I don't know. She explains that she can see a great force is trying to stop Karstenegatio, and they will not be able to light the last lighthouse without our intervention. And lastly, we as an audience finally get a proper explanation for Felix's initial motive behind this whole ordeal. After the storm on Mount Aleph, Felix, his parents, and Isaac's father were rescued by Saturos and Minardi, who had been tasked with stealing the elemental stars so that they could set their plan into motion. The Northern Fire Clan of Prox sits upon the edge of the world, a land forgotten by all, whose days are numbered as the growing expanse claims more of their territory every passing day. They figured out this whole world-ending shit long before we did, but no one would believe them, especially not Vale, so they had to take matters into their own hands. After their initial failure, they took Felix and the survivors back to their homeland of Prox, where they lived out their days until the time was right to try again. Felix's parents are currently being held not so much as hostage, but as insurance to remind him of what's at stake. As a result of all this information, we are able to convince Isaac's team that our mission is one worth doing, that the fate of the world depends on it, and agree to work together. This is Felix's mission now. Everyone is happy to help wherever it need be. Speaking of which, there's been one member of our group whom I've been neglecting up until this point. You see, despite being originally taken against her will, Sheba has been an important member of our team this whole time. She mentioned something towards the beginning of our journey about how she has her own reasons for coming with us, and now's when she decides to share all of that. She thought that she would find some answers about her past by coming to Jupiter Lighthouse with us, but alas, she could not find such closure. Kraden actually offers a few kind words here, seeing as they were both orphans raised by Babby's empire, and helps reconcile her in that it isn't within our past as to where our future deeds lie, much like any one of the misfits in our group can attest. You fucking murdered Saturos and Minardi in cold blood. They did nothing wrong. That's right, we finally have the full gang together at long last. Any of the 8 playable characters from both games are now here, complete with all of the equipment, money, levels, and Jin that you transferred, and they can be put into any arrangement that your heart desires. You want to make a team of only warriors? You go ahead and beat the living shit out of those monsters. Want to make a battle harem with Felix at the helm? You go ahead and do that, you fucking Chad. Show the ladies who the real hero is and get that motherfucking bread! Before we finally hit the end game, there's just a little more that I want to cover. First of all, we need one more power from the last of the elemental rock dungeons, but more importantly, I want to cover some of the end game content. There's a few optional dungeons that become available around this point, the last of which only opening up if you've collected every single Jin from across both games, which all rise up the difficulty level to something that's, dare I say, fun? I don't want to sell it too hard. It's not so challenging that it's like something out of Shin Megami Tensei, but the optional bosses here are some of the most fun that you can have with the combat in the entire series. Finally, something more than just hit them and sometimes heal until one of you dies. You have to work alongside each of their gimmicks and take advantage of them to get the upper hand, my favorite of which being the Star Magician, who constantly summons allies to his aid, each with their own devastating effects, the most important of which to deal with being the ones that heal him for almost 1,000 health every turn. Each of these dungeons has some neat endgame equipment for you, as well as the fanciest summons in the entire game. I only wish that more of the game was on this level of challenge, but hey, you know, that's what ROM packs are for, I guess. When we reach the village of Prox, we can see for ourselves the desperation of a people so hell-bent on risking their lives to save the world from decay. It's an absolute wasteland. People are counting the end of days, trying to make the most of what precious time they have left. When we arrive, news spreads quickly that Felix and Isaac's parents have mysteriously and suddenly vanished, with Agatio and Karst having long already been sent off to finish the lighthouse with no word. The people of Prox plead to us with their lives to finish what they could not. As we approach, we can see that the lighthouse itself is teetering on the edge of the ever-growing abyss. If nothing is done soon, there won't be anything that can stop the end. Everything that you've learned thus far is being put to the test here. Even abilities that were at one point exclusive to the first game see use once the old crew is in your party, and they're all thrown together in interesting combinations. At about the halfway mark, we are stopped by 2 dragons who put up a good fight, but in the end are revealed to be Karst and Agatio, who were stopped by the Eye, who says they lack the willpower to climb up any further. Even in their dying moments, these two continue to be pathetic excuses for antagonists. But in any case, they throw us the Mars Star with their dying wish to see us finish our job. Something that does pull on my heartstrings a little is how everyone in the Fire Clan is supposedly immune to the cold, which is why they live secluded for so long in the north. But as they fade, they feel a chill run up their bodies for the first time in their lives. Once that's taken care of, after one last gauntlet through the puzzles of the lighthouse, we finally make it to our final destination. But as one would expect by now, it wouldn't be the top of a lighthouse without something stupid stopping us in our tracks.
What's up, bitches? How about another game over for old time's sake?
The Wise One returns to question why Isaac and Garrett have gone and disobeyed its order. While we claim to be rescuing the world from certain doom, the Wise One decrees that death and destruction are inevitable. With the power of alchemy unleashed upon the world, one would quickly rise to claim that power and destroy all around them. With the seal secured on the world, at the very least, life would be prolonged as long as possible. Even now, there exists one who would lay claim to the world. You know him, you love him, you never get to fucking fight him, it's your boy Alex back at it again! It would appear that he instigated this whole plot from the very beginning. How he came into contact with such knowledge remains a mystery, but he has been made aware of the power of the lighthouses, secured an alliance with those who would seek to bring that power back into the world, all so that he could rule everything himself. For when all 4 of the lighthouse's beacons light up again, their power gathers together above Mount Aleph and forms the titular Golden Sun. Clap, clap, you fucking did it. Do you want a medal or something? Are you proud of yourself? That light, being the very essence of synergy itself, could turn an adept from about a man into a god. So then why doesn't the stand-in deity just do something about it? The Wise One claims that they cannot interfere with the actions of mankind, to which we respond, then kindly get the fuck out of my way, I'll deal with it myself. Of course, the Wise One still claims to have the best intentions for mankind in heart, so while it doesn't directly stop us, maybe a miracle might. Oh, what the actual fuck. Last time it was pretty cool, but this is literally just an ass-pull. The Doom Dragon, for realsies this time, is our final challenge, and you know what? It's actually a pretty decent fight. Be prepared to go in it for the long haul, because this thing has a ridiculous amount of health. 3 different phases, an attack that drains every party member's Jinn into standby, and a move that deals massive damage to the whole party, easily capable of taking everyone out without some defensive buffs applied. Don't be afraid to swap out party members mid-fight if need be. A neat trick is that members of your reserve team still recover Jinn at the end of turns as long as they're still alive. When all that is taken care of, the tragedy reveals itself. If the 2-headed dragon last time was Saturos and Menardi, then this 3-headed dragon has to have been someone, and those somebodies were Isaac's and Felix's parents. As if it were one last cruel test by the Wise One to see if mankind had the resolve to take the responsibility of the world into their own hands, all seems lost, but regardless, the job must be done. Felix might have not been able to save his parents, but the world will have to do. And as the final beacon is lit, it would seem that yet another miracle is taking place. All around the world, the Wise One was visiting people in their dreams to warn them of the danger surrounding the lighthouses and Mount Aleph as their power accumulates into the forming of the Golden Sun. It was all a stall for time so that as many lives could be saved as possible, including our own. We take that warning ourselves and make our way back to Prox as quickly as we can. And when we do, by some third miracle, it would seem that the lives of Isaac's father and Felix's parents have not been fully lost. The power of the lighthouse had given them a second chance. We make our farewells and journey back home. And as the credits roll, we see the results of Alex's scheme. And when the light of the Golden Sun bathes his glorious body, fucking nothing happens. It turns out that the Wise One was the sneakiest rat of them all and fucking pranked the shit out of Alex. He knew that one day the seal on alchemy would have to be broken, so he imbued some of the Golden Sun's power into the Mars Star way back when, and passed it down to your fucking boy, Isaac. All a part of the big fucking test. Without unlimited power, Alex remains helpless as the Wise One pile drives his ass into the ground so hard that the mountain crumbles beneath him. Ripperino, Alex, he's definitely never coming back from that one. And finally, once all is said and done, our gang makes it back home, only to come back to find nothing but a crater where Vale once stood. In the end, it looks like Isaac was the true loser all along. All glory to the mighty Chad Felix! Felix for Smash Ultimate, baby! Nah, I'm just kidding, they all evacuated. They wouldn't have done so many ass pulls already if everyone wasn't gonna have a happy, sappy ending. Yeah, the end. What do you want, a fucking medal? I'm done. I'm finally done! Going back to my childhood, playing these two games for the sake of these videos, it puts the series that I dearly love into a new perspective. I've seen these games in ways that just weren't possible back then. In some ways, I love them even more, and in others, I'm starting to see the flaws a little. Don't take that the wrong way, I'm still a huge fan, and I'll keep fighting the good fight to get more people to play these games. But the sad truth is that they've always been teetering on the edge of mediocrity, especially compared to the JRPGs of today's age. The game has a lot of pacing issues, and a lot of what you do doesn't get explained or put into context until after it's already been done. Your goal is lighting the lighthouses, but over 2/3 of the game are spent dicking around, looking for a boat, exploring, and it's not very well communicated that you need to do those things in order to progress. At least not without talking to every NPC on the map. There's a lot of... What's one of those fancy game analysis terms that I can use to make me sound smarter than I actually am? Yeah, that'll do. Dungeons can drag on a lot longer than they need to. The villains that you fight with have no place in the story, and the true villain, among others, never get their comeuppance by your hands. The game has a lot of issues with having so much build-up, but never a big enough payoff, and somehow the biggest climactic moments are always just ass pulls that come out of nowhere. The game is still stupidly easy, and there aren't even a lot of boss fights, let alone challenging ones until the endgame. Despite all of that, Golden Sun: The Lost Age is still one of my favorite games ever. It's easily the best game in the series. I've said it before, the game plays to its strengths, to excellent effect. For its time, there was no game on a Nintendo handheld that had such a grand scale. To this day, the list of games that let you transfer your saves from one game to its sequel to a good effect is ridiculously small. The class system is dynamic, the animations are breathtaking, the soundtrack is to die for, the world building is 10 out of 10! So much more so than the first one, this game is a world adventure. Everywhere you go, you learn more about the dynamics of each culture, how the events that you directly had a hand in affects them, their myths, their legends, all of which tie back into your main journey in some way. The places you go and the things that you do this time all feel more thematically appropriate to the narrative of the game, and it makes for something so gosh darn memorable. Unfortunately, it's doubtful that we'll ever get another game in the series again, not without the stars aligning, but it's still important to remember what we already have before asking for more. It's not a game that's going to appeal to everyone, but it does appeal to me. And in the end, that's all that fucking matters. Eat my dick, Anti-Isaac fans. We'll get him in next time for sure. Mark my fucking words. Whoo, boy, these videos were a fucking journey. Thank you so much for joining me once again, everyone. If you enjoyed these huge plot analysis videos, please be sure to let me know in the comments. I have some ideas for more projects like this one, but I'd like to know if that's something you'd be interested in seeing more of, and please be sure to subscribe if that's the case. If you want to be updated with my video progress, please be sure to follow me on Twitter, where I don't actually do that and instead just post dumb memes. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.